Hello, hello, hello. I think it's just now good afternoon, 12 o'clock on the dot. I hope whoever's here nice and early is having a nice day. I will ramble for the first 90 seconds to allow people to join. But yeah, really looking forward to this. If you are here, please say hello. Josh, I know you're on your phone. Can you, I don't know what the layout is on there. Can you see comments that are popping up?
I don't think I can see anything.
Okay. Can you just see me and you?
Okay. Yeah, literally just me and you, and nothing else.
If I see anything, then I'll make you known of that.
Sometimes I've been on podcasts before. I can't even see myself, and just a blank screen in front of me. That's a bit unsettling. So
that's a bit weird. You know what faces you put in, do you?
No. Sometimes it's a quiet bunch, and it's exhausting talking to yourself.
Yeah, it can be really hard. That's why I like online delivery, especially when you're doing workshops or courses, right?
Yeah, like a bit of interaction. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, if anybody does comment, I will just kind of mention it and say hi or ask the questions you have come through. As Josh, for some reason, the link or the platform we used to get live wasn't working on Josh's computer, so we're here on his mobile.
So if I get a sore arm, then you might see the phone just wobbling around as my arm gets fatigued.
Yeah. You need one of these, Josh. I should have sent you one of these earlier.
Yeah, I actually got one of those. I should do that, really. But then I was worried about the sound, so it's all right. I'll use it as a training option.
There you go. Building a bit of muscle in the old arm. All right. We are at 2-minute mark. We'll get started. First off, I'm really looking forward to this conversation. A man from my own kind of heart in regards to kind of performance and kind of not just performance from how well do we perform, but from a lifestyle of performance, looking at stress and how we manage that for our own performance, and also from a career within sport, and using that to lead and manage stress for performance, as well as a fantastic and really interesting element from special forces and the military. So I'm really excited to see what Josh has to say today. But before we get started and before I get Josh to introduce himself, I'm just going to quickly introduce myself. So if you don't know who I am, I'm the founder of Employees Health. Employees Health is a workplace wellbeing company. Alongside that, I'm a high performance coach. I help senior leaders, managers, and employees perform at their best, both in and outside of work. So yeah, if you want any support or you have any questions around anything I do, please let me know. So that's me out of the way, and that's all about you, Josh. Welcome. I'm looking forward to this conversation. Could you just quickly introduce yourself and tell me a bit more about what you do?
Certainly. So firstly, thank you for inviting me. Pleasure to be here. I've got absolutely no idea who I'm talking to, but hello, whoever you are, however many you are. My name's Josh Fletcher. I'm a performance or wellbeing consultant, if you like. I come from a large family. I'm the youngest of 4. My older siblings were always out doing older sibling things when I was growing up. So I spent a lot of time on my own. My parents were out being busy working, trying to pull in bread for 4 kids who are all around a similar age. So that made me really 2 things. It made me very feral and very independent. And that's 2 things which I've carried throughout my entire life and my career. I suppose it's probably some of my biggest strengths and my biggest weaknesses. And some of that you'll see throughout this kind of talk and my story a little bit. So from a professional side, those who can't coach, I'm a failed rugby player, hands like Hal's udders. So I was never going to make it as a pro rugby player. But I felt like I had everything else I needed physically and mentally, just had no talent, which was a bit of a stumbling block. So that led me down a path of coaching. So I was a strength and conditioning coach, don't really know that section at the moment. A strength and conditioning coach, performance coach for about 18 years. So I kind of went straight in at the deep end. I went from personal training into Olympic sport, where I just dived straight in with a Olympic medal winning program for London Games, and we picked up a couple of medals. Well, we only sent 4 people and got 2 medals, so it's not too shabby. Then I moved into pro rugby. I kind of experienced my first dip professionally after that Olympic program, where I was asked to reapply for my own job when I didn't get it, and that forms part of my story. That's obviously pretty crushing to take. Then pro rugby, I did 3.5 years where I encountered bullying, narcissistic boss who was getting after everybody, not just me. So it was an incredibly tough place. In 2016, I woke up, I fell asleep behind the wheel of my car, woke up on the side of the motorway. And I'm telling you this part of my story because it shapes a little bit around what I do now and why and how I've been able to join some connections and some dots between the work with Special Forces, F2, F3 motorsport, and my own personal experiences, which probably will relate to some of you guys listening. After the rugby, I ran away. I dropped everything, like literally mic drop, ran away to India for a year. In India, I massively found my mojo for my industry and life, I guess. I then left India because I didn't like the way that some of the athletes were being trained and coached. So I then got a job with Special Forces in Romania, where I set up a human and mental performance program for Romania, which became a little bit of a hub site for the Balkans region. From there, that was where I got seriously kind of like interested and intrigued, and I joined some dots that I wasn't clear on before, and that was what happened to me when I fell asleep behind the wheel. And I was sent on this course from NATO Special Forces headquarters, mental performance and resiliency, and a large element of that was around stress management. And then after graduating that course, again, like I say, I joined those dots, came back to the military role, and was able to implement a mental performance skills program, or begin the introduction of. Contract finished up in Romania, moved over to motorsport, F2, F3, moved to France during that time as well. And now I split my time between UK and France. I have a small company called Wellness Blueprint, which supports organizations and individuals to change their relationships with stress in order to impact their lives, build their career, which kind of fits into the life that they want to lead, rather than the other way around. Supporting people with work-life harmony, organizations with some of their biggest challenges relating to productivity, absenteeism, challenge, retaining talent, that side of things. So at all levels through organizations. So yeah, I mean, we're here to talk about some of those more wacky experiences, I suppose. And my job, what I feel I need to do, is translate some of those principles into our everyday life. So I consider myself to be two things now, really. Like, number one, to be like a translator of those principles to your everyday life. And number two is that, like, I try to remove barriers to well-being and self-care. And that's the two fundamental things that are important to me. So that is a very long-winded intro.
No, I think it builds a really fantastic story for leading on to some of the questions I have for you. First of all, thank you for sharing. I'm not sure how much of that story we could probably uncover, but I feel sure we'll have a good go of it, especially through some of the personal experiences and how you reflected and what you've learned from that. My first question is, as you can see, you've done quite a lot. You've worked in many different sports environments. You've worked with the military and special forces. What's the biggest learning when it comes to managing stress?
Stress, how we respond to stress is a choice, and that we can always choose. We can't. There's a great book from Viktor Frankl, which, if you haven't read it, everybody should at least once in their life. It's called A Man's Search for Meaning. Mm-hmm. And essentially, the basic premise is we can't actually control that much in life, but we can always choose how we respond to different situations and challenges and setbacks. So that's fundamentally important. We can't always choose how much stress we have in life. We can't always remove that stress and drama that we have in our life, but we can always choose how we respond to it. And that's always something that we can focus on. Of course, we want to try to mitigate and remove as much as possible, but fundamentally, stress management, how we experience stress, is the choice. And that's what kind of links all of the elite environments together. And the principle that can be translated to your everyday life would be that you can control how you respond to stressful situations, But the key thing is it's a skill, and it's a trainable skill, but you just need to know how to train it. And that's where those guys excel, because they're not naturally more resilient to stress. They're trained in these elements from the day they walk into boot camp as a squaddy, not just when they get into their special forces. And part of what we did was around stress inoculation and exposing them to increasing stresses and pressures in order to build that resilience and that emotional control when it comes to responding and not reacting.
Yeah, I love that. The fact it is a skill, and life will teach you that. So in this, you see this play out a little bit in regards to our generations, right? The older generations seem more resilient. Is that just because they've experienced more of life, or is that because and they've had more stresses to deal with? They might not deal with stress well, but they've had more situations to manage through and build resilience.
Yeah, I mean, there's no substitute for experience. I actually don't think this is a skill that is trained, and I don't necessarily know much about the kind of education system now, but I know that we can take some onus and responsibility to manage stress a little bit more effectively, to not model kind of emotionally led behaviors for our kids and the younger generations. And I also feel that if we put time and attention towards responding and not reacting, and not kind of leading with an emotional reaction, then we can send a really positive message out there, but we can also have much more effective outcomes in challenging situations for ourselves. So I don't know is the answer relating to the generational thing, but I do know that if we put time and attention into training the skill, then certainly we can have more positive outcomes to challenge and adversity, both in the moment and chronically.
Mm-hmm. I like what you said there about the process of not reacting but responding. Can you build on that?
Yeah. So a reaction, ultimately, we often respond emotionally. It's an innate primal response to something which is a fear, and that leads to an elevation of our sympathetic nervous system, which is that fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and that's our default because we are hardwired and programmed to constantly be scanning for danger. So we're hardwired for that. So what we need to do is rewire that and make a different choice. But it takes a lot of time, and it's almost like there's a chimp on your shoulder. I think a lot of people will have read Chimp Paradox, and they'll have heard of like their monkey brain. Well, the chimp is like fed by emotion. The chimp is fed by like reaction, and it likes to think quick, and it likes to lead with emotion. It likes to escalate. But you can calm this chimp down, and you can calm that. It doesn't like reason, it doesn't like logic, and it doesn't like you pulling on information which you stored in your computer, your hard drive, if you like. So that hard drive is like creating new wiring, and that new wiring is the chimp being like us kind of taking control of that emotional reaction. I don't know about you guys, but 99.9% of the time when I react with emotion, it is not a favorable outcome, because emotion plus emotion equals escalation, or emotion plus stress often equals escalation. So 9 times out of 10, it's not going to do us a service. And I don't do myself justice if I react emotionally. And I'm sure I speak for a few different other people when I say that as well. So I guess that next question is, well, what can you do about it? Well, we know that there's a primal response. Stress comes in, our body dumps this cortisol into our brains, dump cortisol into our body, a message gets sent down, and we're primed to fight, to freeze, to flee, or to kind of roll over. And what we can do is we can use our physiology and to send a message back up that we're safe. So our body will stay in that ramped up state, that fight, flight, freeze, fawn state, until it receives a message that we're safe. And we can send those messages through our behavior. And essentially, this is what the military guys get really good at. They call it the 3 Rs, or this is a tactic that we used and that I learned about in the NATO course. So the 3 Rs is recognize, reset, and refocus. Recognize that there's a stressful situation taking place. Recognize that this sucks. You wouldn't necessarily choose it. Recognize there is high stress and accept it. That slight level of acceptance buys you enough time to kind of enact step 2. And also saying this out loud, like, this sucks, like, I really wouldn't choose this. It's not brushing it under the carpet. It's not hiding it. It's genuinely acknowledging it to the group or to yourself. And that can be as powerful as someone else saying it to you. So it's almost like positive self-talk. Step 2 is get into your body. Use your physiology to lower your stress response so that you can enact step 3. By lower your response and get into your body, I mean some sort of intentional breath work, so an extended exhale, something like a physiological sigh, so in through the nose, a little additional puff in at the back end of that inhale, and then a really long exhale, releasing the muscle tension in the face, the hands, the shoulders. Just one breath, like so powerful. Give it a try now. So a normal breath in through the nose, a last bit of exhale at the top end, doesn't have to be too aggressive, and then a long extended exhale, lowering down your muscle tension as you go. So powerful. Just that's one breath, like one breath, and that is sending the message, I'm safe. It's sending the message back up. It's super quick. If that's one breath, imagine what you could do with multiple breaths of like deliberate, intentional nervous system response suppressing. It's absolutely incredible. You can also use things like unclenching your jaw, unclenching wrists, forearms is a big one, grip, relaxing your shoulders, all sorts of different things like that. It's something physiological to get inside your body. And that buys you enough time for the chimp to go, to take a little breath for step 3. And step 3 is refocus. The smallest next step that you can take, positive step that you can take in order to move yourself out of that situation and towards a more positive outcome. So an example in your everyday life might be some idiots just cut you up in traffic. Your hands tighten on the wheel, your brow furrows, you can feel your jaw clenching, you're getting frustrated, your arms tighten up because you're gripping the wheel tight. Try a physiological sigh. So that gives you enough time to release your grip, check your mirrors 1, 2, 3 as you refocus, and then turn on the radio and try and find a music station which you like. That's just about enough time for you to start thinking about a different reaction. And that's a really, really effective way. This works super well. So 2 quick examples from me would be, I lost my laptop. I left it on a plane, and I lost 3.5 years worth of work. I lost my entire business, and I had a room full of people looking at me like, how is he responding like this after losing his whole business? And I was using the 3 Rs like over and over and over, and it was able to stand up. And the second thing is that I dropped 1 kilogram of yogurt all over my open fridge, which just absolutely splattered all over the floor. And my instant response was, balls. And then that was it. It was gone. It took me half an hour to clean up. It was an absolute ball ache, but ultimately it just shows that these types of things can work in your everyday life. This is a strategy I've been using for about 3 to 5 years. And it's also something that I use with all my clients and the people I work with. And it's super, super quick and effective way to manage your emotional responses, which is the beginning of changing your relationship with stress.
Yeah, I love that. Can you just say the 3 Rs again for people who maybe not have heard those?
Yeah, 3 Rs: recognize, reset, and refocus.
Reset. Yeah. I mean, it's quite a quick way, and I think when we spoke the first time, we used a couple of examples from the military or stories that you'd heard from the guys who are on the front lines having to deal with these stressful situations. Can you maybe give an example of that, or some examples around how the military or the sports manage stress?
Yeah, so I think if you've watched any sort of military film whatsoever, then you'll have seen it in action. Somebody gets shot, somebody gets injured, they still have a job to do. And this was an example that we used. I mean, I won't go into the details of it, but essentially an individual got injured within a team setting in the middle of a job. They've still got to go and execute that mission, and they still have to get their mind into the right space to do that. So that's the outcome. That's like possibly one of the most stressful situations that they can imagine, but they trained for that. They've been training for years and months to get to the point where they can respond and not react, so that they can manage their emotions and bring them back under control using strategies like the 3 R's in order to do what they need to do to the standard and level they need to do it, with some insanely intense situations taking place all around them. And we're talking gunfire, we're talking like loss or injury of their teammates, we're talking about a war zone. So to take some solace in the fact that the stresses and the pressures that you have, if they're not at that pace that these guys are experiencing, then you can absolutely train this skill. The motorsport guys, they used a kind of condensed version of the 3 R's, which was just that kind of physiological element. So qualifying is the most stressful point of a race weekend, and everybody knows that the stress is up. So you don't need the first R, you don't need to recognize, because it's just there, it's an ever present. So what they do is they're moving at 300 plus kph sometimes. So what they'll do is they'll do a super rapid version of this. So it's a release of the grip. I don't mean full release, I mean the release of the tension, so they're not gripping as tight whenever they hit a straight on the track, or whenever they cross the start finish straight. So they'll release the tension, take a long exhale, or the longest exhale they can, considering heart rates can go up to 150, 160 plus, and they'll release the tension in their shoulders, and that is their reset. And then it's next job is turn one. If they're crossing start finish straight, next job is turn one. They make a mistake in turn one, they might have a split second, like 0.2 between turn one and turn two. They can't compound their errors, and just so they don't compound their stresses, or they work really hard not to. Yet we compound our stresses in life. What they've had to do is practice this religiously in loads of different areas of life, because it's not going to stand up under pressure unless it has been put under, increasing demand and duress and pressure situations. So it's the two things that they do, the motorsport guys, is they try not to compound. So if you make a mistake in T1 and drops you 0.2, you should finish the lap 0.2 down. You shouldn't finish the lap 0.8 down. If you have, and you've compounded your errors and you've not been effective at getting over your mistake. So the second thing they'll do is that rapid kind of release of stress and tension, and save it for later when they're in a different headspace or they have more time. How does that translate to our lives? Well, imagine you wake up late, then you get up, you go and burn your toast, then you walk out the door, you get stuck in traffic, then your computer won't load up. Your computer loading up has got absolutely nothing to do with you burning your toast. But somehow we'll just compound those errors and we'll stack them up. Compound those stresses. The only relationship between any of those is that little dump of cortisol that's come in from and our nervous system ramping up because we sense fear. But that primal response has now changed from being a fear of our life and a fear of our family's life when we're in a cave back as Neanderthals. The response has stayed, but now that fear relates to the different stresses and pressures that exist in our everyday life. It's not about life and death anymore. It's about what we see on social media. It's about raised voices in the street. It's about someone cutting you up in traffic. Like the response is still the same. And if compounded, that's how we get towards that chronic stress, which is, what leads to burnout. Obviously, that's what I experienced, and what is a very tough thing to deal with. And that's the thing that's costing organizations millions and millions and millions.
Yeah. And it's also how you respond to it all as well, right? Like you can have those stresses, and as you said, those stresses can happen. Do they compound and get worse or connect? but also like how you then take those into your day-to-day meetings. And I can imagine that's probably a big challenge for people in the professional world.
Yeah, absolutely. Ultimately it's a choice, but don't expect to be able to compartmentalize your stress, because your body doesn't know your mind. Your body doesn't know the difference between being chased by a lion, your boss shouting at you, and being late or stuck in traffic. It doesn't know the difference. It's just a slight difference in the volume of cortisol that's dumped into your body, but really it doesn't know the difference. So you need to train this response, and it will have huge monumental impacts on all areas, because it's a physiological response. It's a upregulation, as in like you're ramped and you're stressed, or it's a downregulation. It's a very trainable skill. And if you can master some of these in the moment tactics, like the deliberate extended exhales, like the release of tension, like the brief, like mindfulness, micro breaks, you can stack up those positive habits, which can have a huge impact. And then you need to start to alter your relationship with stress, which relates to responding, not reacting, which relates to reflecting on previous responses to stressful situations, and then choosing a different path, mapping that out in order to rewire that kind of immediate automatic response, which is a emotional one.
Yeah, I think a key part to all of this is being able to be self-aware and self-reflective. Like you can be stressed but not actually really know that you're stressed, and you have these moments like we know when someone cuts us up and we get pissed off. We might not know that that's a stress. We might not know that actually in the moment that we can respond to the fact we're pissed off, because you're in that moment, right? To being able to switch off and understand, be aware with that. But it's also the self-awareness of prolonged stress, and actually the things that happen to us can cause us stress, but we might not notice it. So you got any strategies around that?
Yeah, if you've got a heartbeat, then you've got stress in your life. Simple as that. So it doesn't matter if you're an animal or you're a human, you have stress in your life. And it's about recognizing and accepting that, and that deep self-awareness to say, well, that is a stressor, but I'm all right with it. And the challenge comes when the demands being placed on us outweigh our resources to be able to deal with it. So really, when it comes to our resources and our demands, our resources are our coping strategies and our skills. And some of that is our general well-being. Some of that is our deliberate strategies and tactics like this. And some of that is our ability to be able to release and relax. And that's our self-care. So those are the fundamentals of the building blocks, if you like. Then you've got the stressors. So the stressors can be external factors. It can be work. It could be a relationship. It could be all sorts of different things. But sometimes you can control that, and sometimes you can't. So this then relates to kind of internal and external environment. External is everything that is around you. So people, conversations, work, colleagues, the news, social media, etc., etc. You can't always change those things. You can't always remove them and just totally get rid of them, but you can mitigate them and put some boundaries in place in order to protect yourself a little bit. And you can also change the way in which you interact, or you frame those things to you, and so that they don't kind of sit and harm you, I guess. We've all got drama in our life, but essentially there's two types of drama, really. There's toxic drama and there's life challenges. Like you want to try and eradicate as much toxic drama as you possibly can. And if you can't eradicate it, mitigate it and put some boundaries around it to protect your energy and your health. And then the life challenges, those are the types of things that if you were going through, you would want support with. So that might be a bereavement, relationship troubles, a family problem, and you would want to help people. We're naturally helping individuals, but the goal is to not take it out of someone else's backpack and put it in your own. So when we are helping other people, we need to make sure we're in a good place emotionally and energy wise to be able to receive that, and also know that if we're supporting someone else, that we're doing so with clarity and self-awareness that we're going to need a little bit of recovery time after. So mapping in some sort of activity or self-care that we like to do. When I mentioned the internal environment, essentially that's what we consume. So what we consume through our eyes, our ears, our nose, our mouth, and we are 100% responsible for that. And we need to be a bit more aware, I feel, of what we put in, what we soak up,
Mm.
and where we are contributing to the problems. So that could be through lack of movement, that could be through alcohol consumption, it could be through poor food choices, it could be through engaging with other people's drama, social media. So I always like to ask the question, like, where are you contributing to the problem? And then that helps with that element of control and saying, you know what, like, there are a lot of things I can do here, even though that situation over there I can't control and is really difficult and toxic. What I can do is this, and you'll be surprised at how much you can actually influence when you start to frame things like that.
Yeah, I love that. I think that how you phrase that was fantastic, and I keep thinking all the way through that. One of the things I've done to manage, I guess, one of the stresses, probably through the positive psychology interest I have, is I just don't watch news anymore, and so that kind of helps me mitigate some of those negatives and some of the toxic stress going on in the world. It makes me a bit oblivious to some things, but I'd much rather be oblivious to those things than worry about those things and cause me stress and anxiety about what's going on in the world where I literally have no control over.
We're sponges. We're sponges, and we sponge it all up, and we sponge it up from all angles. And you'll be amazed at when you start to put some boundaries in place around toxicity and negativity. You'll be amazed how much you can actually keep away, and how naturally you just feel lifted. And you can feel the energy when you go into a room. And we soak up energy. We're literally hardwired. It's like this coherence that we have. We can feel other people's energy, and we can feel the energy in a room. So we just need to be cautious about what we're allowing in and what we kind of give out as well.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. So how does this translate to leadership?
Well, first and foremost, the leaders are human beings as well. So we need to look after ourselves. Like, everybody's heard that phrase, put your own oxygen mask on first. You can't be in a place to support someone in the way in which they need unless you are at the level you need to be. And in order to be at that level, there needs to be that deep self-awareness of what you need to be on point and be the person that you want to be. So ultimately, it's everything that we've just spoken about, but then you have the bolt-on of understanding your unique work challenges and what the unique challenges that come with being a leader, and understanding that might mean something different to you than you're getting from the wellbeing program where you work. So you might need some sort of external support, or you might need some sort of different strategies and tactics, because we know about wellbeing and self-care. It's not one size fits all. And I suppose the second thing really is to truly kind of understand how to support other people. So how to help your team and your staff without taking the big rocks out of their backpack and putting them in your own. So you need to have your own kind of filter system for that, but you need to have clarity on how to build this kind of environment and culture for your team. And I think a really effective way to do that, I'm coming around more and more to the idea of a really collaborative approach, and really trying to understand, right, as a team, if you've got, I don't know, 5, 10, even 20 people, it's like, what does well-being mean to you? And what are your boundaries? And how can I support you with those two things? Then there's that whole leading from the front thing. It's not do as I say, not what I do, because a group and a team are going to follow what you do. You could talk about well-being till you're blue in the face, but if you're not practicing it, and that's obvious to everybody because you're perhaps not in shape, or you're drinking 50 coffees a day, or your eating habits, or your exercise habits, you're staying late at the office, you can tell your team and you can guide your team, but they're going to observe and they're going to see, and they're going to model your behavior. So it's about embodying some of these things if you believe in it, and that's how to create this sustainability. Like, for me, one of the biggest things that I've noticed about leaders, we talk about high performance. Well, one of the biggest areas that gets missed out and not talked about because it's not sexy enough in the athlete and the performance world is recovery and regeneration and effective programming of your time and your energy. And in the athlete world, we call it periodization. So it's mapping out when you have energy, when you don't have energy, when you need a rest, when you're pushing hard, when you're backing off, and when you just have absolute time off and downtime. And as leaders, we're generally pretty poor at that, about truly protecting ourselves, truly not being accessible, truly not pestering anyone else in the team, and truly switching off. It's something that a lot of people struggle with and get wrong. It's not a weakness, it's an absolute necessity. It's a fundamental building block of sustainability. And at some point, sure as death and taxes, if you go foot down with your in the fast lane, then you'll either hit something or you'll run out of steam. And I've experienced that myself. So it's as sure as death and taxes.
Yeah. And if you look at the best professionals in your industry who do it for the longest amount of time, they're probably making sure they're resting, getting holidays in, getting away, or switching off for the weekends, doing what they need to make sure they're getting their rest and recovery. It's making it clear and obvious to everybody else as well, isn't it?
Yeah, there isn't an elite individual from the sporting world that now doesn't place a significantly high value on totally and utterly stepping away from their sport. What isn't in the spotlight and what isn't in the spotlight yet is the micro breaks that those athletes take during the day. And what isn't in the spotlight is the micro breaks that they take within a session as well. So a micro break is that short, tiny little gap of time that exists for you to just press pause. And what that does is it just releases the pressure valve a little bit, gives you a little bit more headspace. Just imagine it. Look, if you're looking at the video, it's then you fill back up again because you start working again. The natural stress increases, comes down, back up, down, and you want to stay at a balanced level. And a prime example of this is your lunch break. It breaks up the day. It splits the day into two. It's half time in a football match. And the goal is to replenish, to recharge, to reset, and then go again. If you've ever been in a halftime talk, if halftime's 15 minutes, there is never more than 5 minutes worth of talking.
Yeah.
At the elite level, 5 minutes maximum. That means that 10 out of those 15 minutes in halftime is about recovering. And some of that time people go to toilet, some of them they'll chill, some of them they'll focus in, some of them will drift off somewhere else, some people put music on, but 5 out of 15. But what we're doing is we're staying at our desks. What we're doing is we're staying focused on work tasks. What we're doing is using our lunch to catch up. What we're doing is using lunch to go and have a working lunch and talk about work. But there are so many things that you could do. Even if, imagine just grabbing a couple crayons and doing a bit of colouring in for 5 minutes during your work time. Imagine doing a couple of intentional breaths in between work calls so you don't go back to back. Imagine calling a friend at lunchtime. You schedule in a call every lunchtime to talk to a friend. And the rules are no work. Imagine going for a walk around the block. Like, there's 1,000 things that you could do, but ultimately we don't do it because we're busy being busy.
Yeah, I think that lunch break applies to coffee break as well. Like you can have like you look at the other sports, they have quarters, right? Why not have a quarter in your working day? Have a 10-15 minute break whilst you're just having a cup of coffee. You're not doing anything else. It's a little bit of a rest. It's a little bit of a recharge. You might want to grab a healthy snack alongside that. You might even just want to grab a glass of water. Right? It doesn't need to be a coffee. Just that gap and break in between the days is vital as well.
Yeah, it's vital. It's no athlete, like if you imagine like a 90-minute football match or 80-minute rugby match or whatever the sport is that you follow that has some energy system demand on it, like a little bit of longevity in it, you don't just go hard out. If you're doing in a season, which work is really, so the best examples are team sport, for the whole of the match, there are periods when you're stopped, as in half time. There are periods when you're stationary, when there's a break in play. There are periods when you're going absolutely turbo. There are periods when you're jogging. And there are periods when you're going mid-level. And just think of your day and your week and your month like a season. There are periods where you have breaks. There are periods when you switch off. There are periods when you do absolutely nothing and periods when you go foot down turbo. And if you don't have the breaks, then you're not going to be able to be sustainable throughout the season. And season on season. I mean, the most important quality that nobody is talking about in the athletic world is availability. It's not being strong. It's not being fast. It's not having the best shot. It's not being the most accurate at anything. It's actually getting on the field or on the court to play. If you can't get on the court and you can't train, you're no good to man or beast. You're not going to perform. So it's exactly the same in our lives. Like, why do we not prioritize that? What is it you need to do in order to stay available for selection? Meaning to keep going to work and to keep being productive and turning up as a person that you want to be personally and professionally.
Yeah, because we all want that. Although sometimes we feel like we don't. We all want to continue to turn up and perform at our best, progress, and be our best. I think we forget that. I mean, that's the things you just shared. I think are great for leaders within themselves. What about? Is there any tools from both special forces or from elite sport in leadership qualities and how they lead it more so than how they look after themselves? Have you seen any of those strategies that you could share?
Yeah, the leaders will the best leaders, they know their team. The best leaders are understanding what's going on in that person's life and they can see it. So that means they're part of. They're at one with them, but they're not one of them. So it's that kind of unique situation where they know and they can see it. The other thing that's really interesting in a special forces team is that you have your officer and then you have your team sergeant, and the team sergeant is the person who's in charge. It's not the officer, it's the team sergeant. The officers has rank, but the team sergeant is the person who's like really tight with the boys. Like, they know everything, literally everything there is to know. They're these great characters where it's cross between the life and soul of the party, the disciplinarian. They filter to the leader. And I think that's a great model. And a team sergeant is that person who handles so much of the day-to-day running of things because they understand what's going on. And I think it is a model that a lot of teams are using from a well-being perspective. We have I don't know what we call them now, the chief wellbeing officers or the advocates, and we have the mental health first aiders, etc. What we need to do as a leader is support that individual, because that individual is working across the board, and people will be prepared to open up a lot more to their team sergeant than they would to the officer. So it's that true deep understanding of my role and who's my team sergeant. If you don't have a team sergeant because that's not the setup of your organization, well, could you get one? As in, could you talk to some people within your team and just see if they can support you with promoting the well-being without putting any additional kind of time cost on them? Or what skills can you develop as an individual to support your team and more effectively, and create that kind of environment where you can do it collaboratively, or get clarity on what your team needs in order to, perform at their best, be their best, both personally and professionally. Because the more we focus on our lives outside of work, the more abundance, growth, and prosperity we're going to experience in work. And we all know that you can't leave your baggage at the door. Life just doesn't work like that. So either being or creating a really effective team sergeant is huge value. And sport has leadership groups in team-based sport.
Right? Has a captain. So you have, if you look at football, and I use football for a majority of examples because it's the most watched within the UK, and then Alex Ferguson, great, right? You got Alex Ferguson, who is in the manager, who's organising and creating goals, putting the coaching in place, but then the team has a captain. And that captain is the person that is the link between what the manager's trying to do, and then what the captain is, then the part of the team, but also the leader within that, supporting and making sure they're enjoying it, but also making sure they're performing at their best, but also are safe and happy and confident to be able to do what they need to. It's the same process for a company, right? I like that.
Yeah, you've got your captain, but you've got your leadership group. So your leadership group support the captain, hold up the captain, because captain gets sent off, captain's not there for a day. You don't want things to crumble. And in the military, like, everybody has to have those leadership skills. If your captain goes down, your team sergeant goes down, who's going to step up? And so everybody needs to have that absolute clarity of vision, and that ability to be able to step up. And that's about empowering your employees to learn and grow and be challenged and stretched, but with the appropriate support. And when you don't have the appropriate support, or the challenge is too great, that's where things start to get a little bit sticky. Or at the other end, if they're not challenged enough. And I suppose that kind of relates to that individual relationship and making sure you've got the right people in place.
Yeah, I love that. Is there anything else? So one more. Have you got one more leadership as a leader, more so than an individual kind of strategy or support you can mention?
Yeah, I really like those 3 questions I mentioned earlier. So the 3 questions is what does well-being mean to you? The second question is, what are your boundaries? What are your professional boundaries? And the third question is, how can I support you with these? And what you're actually doing with this is you're acknowledging to each individual that well-being is bespoke. You are acknowledging that what works for Harry is not going to work for Barry. You're acknowledging that they are an individual and that you want to support them. By asking a question about boundaries, you are telling them that you know what boundaries are, that you respect boundaries and that you agree to boundaries and you think boundaries are a natural and healthy part of any professional relationship. You're building a really, really strong kind of well-being norm. It's not a culture, it's normal. Like, we've always heard of these sports teams. It's like you talk about culture. This isn't our culture. This is just our norm. This is our normal. This is what it is to us. And then people have to adapt to that normal. And then the final point is how can I support you on that? It's saying, look, I'm a leader. I have, within the confines of my resources, and you're beginning to make a collaborative approach then. So you're opening doors. You're doing a lot with 3 really kind of key questions. And if you've got a big team, you won't have the time to go and do that, but you can kind of, and often if I ask somebody that question, I have done, and you get a lot of people don't know, and that's absolutely fine. And that's the point at which you say, hey, no worries, I'll check back in a week or so. You put a note in your diary and you check back in, give it some thought, and then you check back in with them, and you are then creating a safe space. We all talk about psychological safety. There's nothing safer than asking 3 open-ended questions about how you can support somebody, and it's a really effective way to do that.
Yeah, I love it. Great advice, and throughout as well, in regards to managing stress, because I think once we've mastered that art, that leads to performance and leads to happiness, and isn't that, I think, what everybody's after when we look upon life in general. I can't let you go without answering my final question. What are your top 3 tips for managing stress as a professional?
Respond, don't react. Challenge and change your relationship with stress, and get curious about it. So remove the judgment. So by that I mean, I've done that again, that's interesting, or I've reacted like that. So get curious and try and figure out, that always happens when I'm in X situation. I'm tired, I'm hungry, I've had a long drive, I'm this, I'm that, when I've had a conversation with that person. And then you start to observe what your triggers are if you're looking at it with curiosity. And then the way in which you experience stress is a choice. Mm-hmm. So you don't necessarily have a choice about whether you have some stress dumped upon you, but you do have a choice about how you respond to it. And that's something you will always have till the day you die, is that ability to choose how you respond to certain situations. And if you want to hear a little bit more about that, then by all means check out Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, because it doesn't get any more extreme example than that. It's a game-changing book, in my opinion.
Yeah, love that, and a great recommendation. I actually need to sit down and read that. I've had so many people talk about that book, so I need to get that on my bookshelf. I appreciate that. Thank you for your advice. Thanks for sharing your tips. Where can people find you, Josh?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm hanging around on here a lot more these days. You can also find me at wellnessblueprint.co.uk, which is my website. I've got a wellbeing community which I run, which is kicking off in Q2. So that's called the Wellness Hub, which you can find a little bit more information on my website. And I hang around a little bit on Instagram. I don't like any of it, to be honest, but people need to know what I do for a living. I hang around on Instagram, and that's at Wellness Blueprint, and then Twitter, which is Coach Blueprint 1, because Wellness Blueprint was taken. So that'd be kind of where I knock around, and then I just throw my newsletter out quite regularly and share lots of little insights and tips like I have here. But ultimately, I want people to have a strategy and not just a whole bunch of tactics. I want people to know what tactics to pull upon at the right time and really make some kind of sustainable change. It's most of the people I work with, they graduate, so they'll come in and we'll start coaching, and there's an end point, and the end point is, I want to crack on and do this on my own now, and that's great. That's mission accomplished. It's a big tick in my box. So I'm always open to conversation, and so drop me a DM if you got any interest, and please do let me know if any of this has been useful for you.
Love it. Yeah, been useful for me. I've earned 3 hours and a couple of other bits which have been really useful. Thank you everybody for joining. Next one is in 2 weeks. I've got a week off. One of a few over the next kind of 6 weeks. So keep your eye out on that with Dale looking at 4-day weeks and fatigue. Should be really interesting. So keep an eye out. Otherwise, have a lovely finish to the week and a great weekend. Speak to you all soon. Josh, stay there.
Thank you.